Hey dog people, you know I love talking all things muzzle related. Well, I'm so excited to announce that I've partnered with Trust Your Dog, custom dog gear for you and your dog. Trust Your Dog muzzles are completely customizable for your needs and your unique dog. Muzzles are great for a variety of uses, such as allergies, requesting space from triggers, post-op site protection, and of course, bite prevention. Each Trust Your Dog muzzle is expertly fit and handmade, with the choice of bright colors and bling to break down the muzzle stigma. Trust Your Dog's mission is to give humans comfort in knowing their dog is safe, all by empowering humans to trust their dogs. Head on over to trustyourdog.com and use my code FREED10. That's FREED10 for 10% off. Use code FREED10 for 10% off your custom muzzle at trustyourdog.com. Welcome to Dog Training Bytes. The show where canine professionals share their key takeaways, big aha moments, and hardest lessons learned from working with dogs. I'm Mattison, certified dog trainer and behavior consultant, and dogs are my life. Every day I get to coach guardians and other trainers into a deeper understanding of canine behavior. But let's face it, sometimes dog training really bites. And that's okay, because when it does, we learn a lot. This podcast is all about sharing the lessons learned from experience, because the stories of when it got tough or when we made a mistake, that's when we learn the lessons worth learning. And it's time we share those with the world. I'll be talking to dog trainers and other pet professionals about times that working with dogs, well, bit. Not literally. Maybe literally. What's most important here on this show, what did they walk away with? What did they learn? How did it shape their approach today? Welcome to Dog Training Bytes, the show where pet professionals share personal lessons that you won't find in any textbook. Today, I'm speaking with Jessica Williams. Jessica is the founder of You Did What With Your Wiener and Pet Talk Media. She is a certified family dog mediator and an expert in dachshund behavior. A dachshund owner for over 20 years, she has spent more than 150,000 hours studying the breed and is the president of Washington State's largest social dachshund club. Jessica holds a master's in communications in digital media, has completed various dog training certifications, and is a graduate of my Canine Behavior Mentorship. Through her award-winning blog, she provides education on dachshund health, training, and adventure. When not working, she enjoys hiking, camping, and traveling with her wiener dogs. Hey, Jessica, thank you so much for coming on today.
Yes, I'm excited. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And I'm going to start where I always start it. Tell us about the weens. Tell the dog people out there about your crew.
Yeah, so currently I have three dachshunds. This is my first time owning three dogs. My oldest one turns 15 tomorrow.
Tomorrow?
Her name is Gretel. They're all miniature chocolate dapple dachshunds. I joke with people I have a type. Um, my first one was not. He was a black and tan, but anyway. And then I have my middle child is Summit, and she is 6. Then he's a year and a half, got a puppy a year and a half ago. His name is Otter. Well, not obviously, I guess by the name, but he's a little boy. And what's interesting was really helped me learn more about dog behavior is that I'm a dachshund sitter. So I have a lot of dachshunds in my house, but Gretel is spayed, but Summit is, for all intents and purposes, intact. She's got an ovary sparing spay, which leaves one ovary. She still goes through heat. So, and then Otter isn't neutered yet. And another dachshund that I dog sit is also not neutered. So this has been a crash course in dog behavior over the last year and a half, dealing with intact dogs in the same house. So, that's the only reason I mentioned their spay neuter status, because it matters in that regard. So
Yeah, it definitely raises the stakes in terms of the management within the home when you have quite an active household. I mean, in more
yes,
ways than one. You've got a little bit of a, I don't want to say a revolving door, but you have a lot of different dogs that come in.
I
And
do really. It is a
yeah,
revolving door.
yeah. And there's a lot of activity with your dogs out in the world as well. They are
hmm
active out in the world. They are not your typical weens.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, I know that you have a couple of different stories for us today, which I'm
Hmm.
really excited about. I know sometimes we can't narrow it down, and these are all a little bit related. So we're gonna be a little bit more rapid fire today, and then talking about the lesson that comes from all of them. So start it off. Let's get to it.
Okay. Well, yeah, I want to do the three little stories because they illustrate different kind of degrees and depth of the same concept, which is honoring what your dog's trying to tell you and meeting your dog's needs. Because that's something over, the last couple of years I've really, really started to focus on, and that's why I did the Family Dog Mediator, because that's really what it's about. But
Yeah.
so my first story is just very simple. And so out of all my dogs, Summit is the most vocal. She likes to bark. And dachshunds are known for barking, but like honestly, who really likes a dog that barks all the time? I don't think anybody really likes that. So
No.
but so part of this journey with her has been trying to figure out why she's barking so much, and me realizing that she really does have reasons that she's barking. It's not just to annoy me.
Yeah.
And so a very simple illustration of that is she'll go over to the fridge and she'll be looking under the fridge and she'll just keep barking. And I used to say, what are you doing? Leave it. No barking. There's nothing under there. There's nothing under there.
Yeah.
And, there's lint and stuff under there, but there's nothing else under there. But then I would eventually go over and look. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go look. So I get the flashlight out and I look under there. And sure enough, there is a piece of food or a treat under there. And she has never been wrong. So now when she looks under the fridge and barks, I don't even bother trying to get her to stop and say, there's nothing there because there probably is. So we've moved the stove, we've moved the fridge, whatever to get to it. And sure enough, there's something under there. And once you take it out and you give it to her or she sees you throw it away and you say that's enough, she's done. But the point being to curb the excessive barking, I just find out what she's barking at and take care of the problem, you know?
Yeah, I
Um,
think that this can present in a lot of different ways. I think we can see this, dogs barking at a lot of different things, any number of triggers, observable or not to us.
mhm.
And sometimes I say to people, don't gaslight your dog, right? Like,
Right.
you know that they probably are onto something. And like, don't call them a liar if you know that they're onto something, because that can be a breakdown in communication. So I love
Yeah.
that you're like, she's always right.
And I listen better. Like when she's out in the yard and she's barking, I can't immediately hear anything. But if I go out there where she is at and I listen, I can usually hear a dog or something bark in the distance. Now, begs the question, is that dog who barked first, I
Right.
don't know. But the point is,
Yeah.
she could have been barking at the other dog barking. That could have been the trigger. So it's like you don't hear it immediately, but if you really listen,
Hmm.
a lot of times you find out they're not really just people say, especially with dachshunds, oh, my dachshund barks. They just bark at nothing. Someone said squirrel farts one time, and I thought
Probably
that was
not
funny.
squirrel farts. It's
Yeah,
true. Squirrel
but
farts in the woods.
dogs have an incredible sense of
Hmm.
hearing,
Hmm.
and so we say they're barking at nothing, but I'm willing to bet that dogs are never barking at nothing. Like
There
it may be,
is very little behavior or any that I would consider random with a dog. There's
it just
always
happened
some
out of
reason.
nowhere.
Right. Yeah. That's
Um,
where thank you protocols can be really helpful,
mm,
where you teach your dog on on a response to the cue, thank you, to kind of resolve their barking. So it kind of
yeah,
brings it to a conclusion by validating, like, hey, I understand that there is a reason, see it acknowledged, but let's bring
it's
it to a conclusion.
It's amazing how many times she'll be laying on the couch and barking, and I come in and I go, "What are you barking at?" And I'm exaggerated with my body language, and I look out the window
Looking around,
ways, and then I
investigating.
turn
Yeah.
around and I'm like, "Thank you, but there's nothing to bark at. We're fine here." And then she'll usually stop barking. It's
Hmm.
weird. I mean, I don't know if there's any scientific proof to that or whatever, but it does, even if it's just distracting her enough for her to forget what she's barking at. it still does have work in some mysterious way a lot of the time. So,
Well, some dogs, and depending on the genetics, they were bred to communicate information, to
right.
alert bark, to purely alert bark and do nothing else about it. And so to be able to sort of, again, bring that behavior pattern to a conclusion and
Hmm.
validate it, I think for some dogs is very fulfilling. And they are
Yeah.
willing to be like, great, I'm done now. I did what I wanted to do. You heard me.
Yes, yeah, it's funny. So my second story is also has to do with barking,
Ah.
but she would just lay in the living room, laying on the couch, and seemingly to me bark at nothing,
Mm-hmm.
bark, 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 and I'm like, what are you barking at? Like, there's nobody outside, there's not,
Right,
but I realized that I mean, most of the time when she barks, she is alerting me to something. And when she's laying on the couch, she'll be under the blankets. She'll pop her head up, like she'll be quote unquote sitting up, but still covered in a blanket, barking. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, you're not even seeing anything.
like in a little cave.
But it's the sound. And what was bothering her is when Otter loves to play and the guest dogs that would come over, they would be wrestling and playing in the living room. And that bothers her. She
Mm.
likes her sleep, first of all.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, there have been some times she's been in a dog bed on the floor and the rough play spills over the bed and she's been pounced on.
Ah,
And so now she is, I mean, of course, she can't talk to me, but the best I can figure out is she's telling me she's uncomfortable. And I think she's uncomfortable because she likes to sleep. They're disrupting her sleep, but also she's afraid of being jumped on.
yeah.
And so now when there's sometimes I don't always notice, but if there's playing, I just preemptively put them in the other room to
Yeah.
play. Or it might go for just a little bit and she doesn't always bark right away. She'll bark after a few minutes and then I'll come in and I'll put them in the other room. But as soon as I put them in the other room, usually things are fine. She stops barking and she goes to sleep.
Hmm.
Um, so I realized it was only when the dog's playing, like I said, make her uncomfortable. And so again, I'm honoring what she's telling me.
Yeah.
I'm like, why are you randomly barking? But then I think about it and really looked at the situation and said, what are you trying to tell me? And of course, it took a little bit of trial and error to figure out what worked there, that
Right.
led me to the conclusion that these are the things that were triggering her. But again, kind of simple fix. I did actually take a class with a lady that knows about dachshunds, and the class is getting them to stop barking because she was constantly barking.
Right.
But then it turns out that she didn't really need like a desensitization protocol. What she needed was what was bothering her to be removed,
Hmm.
you
Yeah, she
know?
was just communicating something. It wasn't that she needed to learn to tolerate something, although, like you said, you certainly can go that route.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the easiest route, maybe, or the one that even felt right. And this just, sometimes there is an easier, simpler solution
Yeah.
to training. Like this is just a management switch.
And I feel like, I went through the mentorship program with you and like you said, I've done some other certifications. I never had aspirations of being a dog trainer. This is like my fifth career and I've kind of fallen into it, but I never felt like I wanted to be a dog trainer because what I saw as examples of dog training didn't fit with my beliefs
Yeah.
and my beliefs about animals and how you should treat them. And I still consider that I've got a bit of an uphill battle and I'm an outlier. But I guess for me, it started with humans. I'm very, very, very much about accepting who this person is and honoring that
Yeah.
and giving them as much space as possible to be themselves. If something's infringing on my rights or my comfort, or, I care enough about this person and there's some conflict, I will address it. But the biggest thing to me is about accepting what you can and honoring who they are. And that also transfers to my animals. So a lot of my training isn't actually training.
It's
It's
learning to
how,
live with them.
yes, how do we live with this? How do we work together? How do we honor who they are? How do we take care of their needs? And if you do those things, these behavior issues you're coming to me for will often go away or at least reduce to the point where they're easier to address.
Yeah.
And so anyway, my third story is a little bit deeper, I guess you will say, but it still boils down to her feeling safe. So she resource guards. She this is a whole long story topic in itself, so I'm going to try and be succinct about it. But she didn't resource guard as a puppy, and she doesn't resource guard towards me. It's only towards other dogs. And at least not that I noticed when she was a puppy, but I think maybe I didn't pick up on some of the signs, and then I made some mistakes like giving her really high value chews and then wrestling them away from her because she wouldn't let go. And then I ended up with a dog that resource guards. So I'm not saying it's all my fault, but I can see how I might have contributed to that. And I spent some time being really frustrated with her and being really upset and not handling the situations that would come up well. And realizing that, again, honoring who she is and what she, obviously I don't want her to attack other dogs, but instead of saying don't be worried, you should let all of these worrying things happen and not be worried about your food. Instead, I said, okay, we're going to make you not worried about your food. She eats in a crate. I have a very small house, so it's hard to separate the dogs, but she eats in a crate. I also put a double barrier up in front of that crate so that dogs can't come up right to the crate wall and stare at her bowl. So
Yeah.
double barrier there. I no longer give her long-lasting chews that she can't eat in one sitting because I'm not wrestling that back from her.
Yep.
Um, and then I use the when we play with toys and other objects. She is my only dog that I've taught to hold things in her mouth, and so it's take and it's give is the command to give it back. And I've started
Yeah.
using the give command with toys, sometimes with low value food items, because if I have to get something from her, I want her to be willing to give it back to me. Most of the time I'm trading for something, so it's a trade. But there's gonna be times that I just need it back. She gives it to me thinking we're gonna trade, and then she doesn't get something and she's disappointed. But so I've really doubled down on teaching her the trade, which is give,
Yeah.
is our word. And then also when she does show signs of being like beginning of the resource guarding, the freezing, the staring, the things like that. Observing what the other dog is doing that's making
Mm.
her uncomfortable, and also diffusing the situation, redirecting. So if I see her getting uncomfortable, she eats in the crate, so that part's eliminated. But if she has a toy that she wants to play with, I don't allow the high value toys out unless I'm immediately supervising. I'm usually physically between the two dogs, one dog on the left playing with one toy, one on the right. But if there becomes any hard staring or freezing, of course, dogs always want the other dog's toy. I don't allow stealing of toys at my house, especially with her. So if a toy becomes, it looks like a dog is just fixated on it, trying to get it from her or anything, or just watching her standing too close, giving the pressure, I I remove the toy, distract them with something else, or otherwise diffuse the situation because she's telling me that she's uncomfortable. So
Yeah.
I'm honoring that and taking care of it. So that has really taught me a lot about body language too, because I used to always blame her for growling at the other dog, but when I turned around and looked at what the dog she was growling at was doing, I realized that it was almost more what the other dog was doing was setting off than her just simply not liking an animal being close to her food.
Yeah.
It was the way they were approaching her. So those are kind of some big lessons for me.
Yeah, and that last example, especially like you said, that was such a kind of deep dive on body language and gave a whole new understanding of how to communicate when I think to your point, a lot of dog training is communicating at towards a dog. Whereas I think we are far more interested in communication that is two-way. And that involves us learning a lot about body language. And I think it's really interesting that in learning to communicate better with Summit and kind of read her better in those moments, it also kind of had you widen your focus
Hmm.
and look at what else is going on in the situation because that's
Hmm.
really interesting too because you can learn a lot about okay well what body language could be triggering from one dog to another because dog to human body language I'm not going to say it's different from dog to dog, but it can be because dogs learn how to communicate differently with us over, years of living with us.
Yeah.
And so we might not know what could set off the dog. And then we look over and see, oh, well, he's staring at her
Mm-hmm.
bowl or inching towards her. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
that's just really, like you said, a really, really great lesson.
Yeah, I had one dog in particular. I was dog sitting. Summit did not seem to like her, and she had stayed before.
Okay, yeah.
Did not seem to like her, and I couldn't figure out why. And my first instinct is to kind of admonish Summit for not liking her, you know. Um, but then I looked at the situation closer because of this past experience and looked, and actually, this other dog, she's very nervous, very anxious, and I found that she was actually, like, for example, I had them separated, but at one moment, this dog was laying on the couch, and I was gonna walk through the living room past the couch and put Summit in her crate. And the other dog was on the couch, looked like she was sleeping. And so I thought I can quickly rush Summit by. But as soon as we came into the living room, it's kind of a entryway into the living room, that other dog shot off the couch and sat in the center of that entryway and looked at us. And I was like, there is the problem right there. This is the
Mm-hmm.
problem. Like the Summit is trying to move around in the house freely. And
Mm-hmm.
this other dog, even though it's coming probably from a place of anxiety and nervousness on her own versus aggression or anything like that, this is what's setting Summit off as this behavior by this other dog. And this isn't appropriate for this other dog to do.
Right.
So that really just helped me manage the situation to realize that. But I wouldn't have been able to take that step back if I hadn't already had that experience with her resource guarding and really noticing, looking around and seeing what else is going on that could be influencing her behavior.
Yeah. I love hearing you say over and over again just that, like, you want to honor who she is.
Mm-hmm.
It's so important. And it's so clear to me that you see each of your dogs and probably every dog as such a unique individual.
Mm-hmm.
And even within the species of dog, even within the breed of Dachshund, each dog is going to have their own little like
Mm-hmm.
dialect of body language and their own little differences. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that that is a real kind of just through line of your approach is that individual approach for each dog and honoring who they are as an individual, honoring the species that they are and the fact that
Mm-hmm.
they are dogs. They're not a pet rock or a robot, which
Right.
I have said to people, maybe you got the wrong species. I've heard turtles are lovely and they don't bark, right? So
Right.
so what would you say, or I guess how would this lesson from Summit, this forever lesson from Summit, ongoing lesson, how does this change the way that you would approach someone if they were having a similar situation with their dog, where their dog was, I guess struggling is how we look at it, but from the average human perspective, when their dog is just barking a lot at seemingly nothing,
Mhm.
what would you sort of take from this to help them step into that new life with their dog?
Well, so I hate to keep mentioning it, but it is relevant. So the Family Dog Mediator program is
Yeah.
applied ethology. So it's looking at the dog, looking at the species, what have they learned, the self, who they are, things like that, and mediating between that being and the people who own that being. And so that is really my first approach to everything. What is your dog doing? What is bothering you? When is this happening? And the first part is basically explaining to people, that maybe this expectation you have for your dog is unfair for them.
Hmm.
And maybe trying to suppress this or always admonishing your dog for doing it and stuff is actually going to create other problems. So how can we meet both needs? You need this, dog needs this. How can we together meet those needs so the dog is satisfied and fulfilled, and then you are also not dealing with this problem, which damages the relationship between when you're frustrated with your dog all the time, not only can they feel that, but it damages how the human feels about their pet. I mean, if it's seamless and you feel like this is easy, it's enjoyable, and it's very fluid and flexible and just kind of, love everywhere, right? But if your dog is doing stuff that is always annoying you, then you're gonna come at it from a place of irritation a lot of the time. Oh, you're doing that again. Oh, you're doing that again. And I mean,
Yeah.
everyone's human. I do it too. I know better, but I still do it. I try 10 ways to be nice to get her to stop barking, but in the end, sometimes I end up yelling at her to stop barking. And I know that that's not really effective, but it makes me feel better.
It's also just a human reaction.
Right. Yeah.
In the same way that barking is a dog reaction, yelling is a
Exactly. Well,
human reaction.
that's another thing that I really realized over these last couple years, or learned was that it's compulsory for dogs to bark. Now, some breeds were selectively bred to bark more often, but when a dog barks, it's a reflex. It's not
Mhm.
a conscious choice they're making. I want to annoy my owner, so I'm going to bark. They're barking for a reason. They have a need, or they're alerting you to something, or they hear something. So I really just try and kind of get people to see things through their dog's eyes first. And now let's talk about what you want to change and how you want it to change.
It can be a compromise, right? I think that that's
Yes.
that's a huge part of this is
Yeah.
just learning to live in partnership with your dog.
Hmm.
And if you want it to be all about you and you don't actually care about your dog's perspective, then yeah, you're going to be met with a lot of frustration because that is
Hmm.
not really a path to a sustainable solution.
Yeah. I mean, I see it more as a cooperative. We are trying to honor our dogs while also giving them the skills they need to live a harmonious life in the
Hmm.
human world.
Hmm.
So training, even basic obedience and stuff is still important, but it's like, how do we marry those two things together? Not just coming in a room and saying, I want my dog must do A, B, and C, no questions asked.
Yeah.
Let's look at the whole picture. Let's, try and satisfy the dog's needs before we start modifying the behavior.
Yes, 1,000%. So, Jessica, is there anything else you would like the listeners to know about you or what you do?
I don't know, just that I'm crazy dachshund lady. Like
Yes.
yeah, I have the blog about dachshunds. I have the club. Now my training is going to be focused on dachshunds. I for years I've been kind of coaching, if you will, dachshund owners just through back injuries, being moral support, providing them information, pointing them in the right direction. I mean, I'm not a veterinarian, but especially when it comes to IV, DD, and back injuries, veterinarians most aren't experts on that. And so I can help people navigate that. And I feel privileged that I have been able to turn my passion for dachshunds and helping other people's dachshunds, not just my own, to like live a wonderful life, turn that into a career. It's kind of mind-blowing, I guess, but
Yeah.
I just want to help all the dachshunds everywhere to live wonderful, fulfilled lives.
Well, and that is what you're doing. And I love that you are so focused because I think that when we, as professionals, do focus and specialize, and then also live full lives outside of dog, right? Like you have a
Hmm.
full life, that's where we can bring our other lived experiences in and kind of focus
Wait,
in
let me
and
stop you. There's life outside of dogs.
oh yeah, there is
Just,
just a little
I'm
bit.
just kidding. No, it is true, but it's mostly dogs.
It's mostly dogs, but you hike and you camp. You're like, yeah, Madison,
With
with the
my
dogs.
dogs.
But it's
But I'm just saying,
bringing those things in,
yeah.
that allow you to just have a different approach and have a different perspective. And the fact that you have
Hmm.
had other careers and this isn't, I think that that's where we can just serve the community in the most complete way.
Hmm.
Because sometimes the answers for a dog situation are not within the world of dog. Sometimes the
Yeah.
answers are things we picked up in our past lives working in corporate or something we learned on a hike the
Yeah, I
other
mean,
day.
I worked a government job. I did manual labor with natural resources. I worked as an environmental scientist for over 10 years. I dubbed myself the dog poop queen because that was my passion. I went back and got a master's degree in digital communications, and I joke, I mean, it's diminishing, I guess, my accomplishment, but I have a master's degree in internets. So
Internets.
like social media and websites and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But it does all of that. It's funny how, you go along in life and you arrive at a point where all of your past experience, even if it seems completely random, helps like almost led you to that right spot to be that perfect person to do that thing.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
yeah.
And I feel like that is the season of your life right now. You're kind of
Mm,
just kind of clicking into that spot that was really just specially designed for you. And there are people out
yeah.
there that are going to really benefit from your expertise. So I'm so excited to see where you take it.
Thanks.
And you can connect with Jessica on Instagram at You Did What With Your Wiener. And you can find more information and a link to her work and incredible blog in the show notes. Thanks for joining us in the world of Dog Training Bites, where every challenge brings a lesson worth sinking our teeth into. See you next time. Dog Training Bites was created, produced, and edited by Mattison Simpson. You can connect with me on Instagram at Dog Training Bites, that's BYTES, and at Freed by Training. For information on today's guest and resources for help with your dog or dog training education, visit www.dogtrainingbites.stream. Looking for more? Listen to my other show, Unpacked, a clinical dog training podcast co-hosted by Sailor Jerry the dog trainer and produced by Straight Up Dog Talk LLC.